All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Ops, Tuesday, March 9th, 2021, and we're here today for a virtual working session on Docket 0216, an ordinance to establish guidelines for permitting retail residential kitchens. This matter was sponsored by Councilor Julia Mejia and was referred to the committee on January 27, 2021. Committee held a hearing on this docket on February 16, 2021. In accordance with Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 executive order, we are having this working session via Zoom. This allows for us to do our business in terms of city council and also at the same time balance the public safety needs of today. The public may watch this working session via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity, 8 RCN 82 and Verizon 964. Yes, it will also be rebroadcast at a later date for public testimony. Written comments may be sent to the committee via ccc.go@boston.gov. This ordinance will amend the City of Boston Code ordinances by allowing for retail residential permits to prepare cottage goods. Operators of retail residential kitchens would be required to comply with the state sanitary code and would be subject to annual inspections by the Health Division of the city's Inspectional Services Department. Applicants for these permits would be required to obtain all necessary permits and regulatory approvals, including approvals from the ZBA, Zoning Board of Appeals. At the hearing, the committee heard testimony from administration officials who discussed issues concerning jurisdiction, authority, enforcement, and resources. Commissioner Irish explained that state law already authorizes residential kitchens and that the city will create an enforcement mechanism through zoning, rules, and regulations. The committee heard testimony from individuals that supported the proposal, explaining that residential kitchens provide a way for individuals to make money, encourage spending in the local economy, promote local farmers, and create a sense of community. The committee discussed what the permitting process should entail and understanding of the permitting process, as well as monitoring the kitchens to ensure sanitation of the products and product safety, as well as landlord-tenant relationships. The committee discussed definitions of the term cottage goods and direct to consumer, use in occupancy permits, adhering to health code requirements, impact on zoning, and of course, impact on parking and or if people are selling out of their homes, how the consumers would access the apartment units. So today, I'm going to introduce my colleague. I'll introduce who's participating from the city, who's participating in terms of advocates, and then I'll introduce my colleagues for some brief opening remarks, and then we're going to go right into this working session. I am fully aware, as all of you are, that Councilor Mejia has also filed a zoning amendment yesterday that is public. What we cannot do is discuss the language of that zoning amendment today because it has not been notified that we're going to discuss that zoning amendment. So you can refer to the zoning amendment generally, that there might be some fixes or there might be ways to streamline through that other vehicle, but we are not going to discuss the language of that zoning amendment today because we did not notify the public, which we require 48 hours in order to do so, about that zoning amendment for today's discussion. So participating today on behalf of the city is, I believe we have Commissioner Irish, Dion Irish of the Inspectional Services Department, Chief of Staff of ISD, Christopher English, the Health Inspector of ISD, Dan Prendergast, Deputy Director of Regulatory Planning and Zoning, Brian Glasscock, of the BPDA, and we have Director of Small Business, Natalia Uturbe, for the City of Boston. We're also joined by the following advocates: Andre Entezari, Irene Nakabonge Lugurish, founder of Mani Juices, and Manisha Sethi, technologically engineer of Indilish. So again, we're here to work on specific language of the docket and what the permit process would look like. So we're not so much in discussing yes or no, as we already know it's legal. It's really the practicality and how this could happen and whatever outstanding issues we may have. In order of arrival, my colleagues I'll introduce shortly. We have Councilor Arroyo, Councilor Mejia, who is the lead sponsor. She'll go first, actually, and Councilor Flynn. So Councilor Mejia when you're ready for any brief opening remarks or setting the stage.
Yes. Good afternoon. Thank you to the chair for working so closely with our office to schedule this working session. We are incredibly grateful for all the hard work and dedication, the advocates, the administration, and the counselors who have brought to this project. During our last hearing, we heard from advocates and from the administration that they support this project and look forward to seeing it implemented. We received nearly 10 written testimonies from members of the public, and each also offering their support. I want to take a moment to address some of the concerns we heard from the counselors. We heard concerns regarding the red tape that would be created through the ZBA, as well as concerns over fire safety and traffic. We prepared and sent out to the chair an amended version of the ordinance, which states in the definition section that the actual that the residential kitchens must follow the zoning code article 2A's definition of accessory home occupation, which states that products that cannot be sold on site. This would address any concerns about liabilities to of landlords, as well as traffic concerns. There will need to be a zoning code amendment to address retail residential kitchens under the accessory home occupation definition, and we have filed a text amendment, as Councilor Edward has just noted. We feel the edits to the ordinance addresses the concerns raised last time, and we hope to see this ordinance pass as soon as possible to ensure that people can get to work in creating residential kitchens in their homes. Thank you so very much to everyone who has participated in this process thus far. Looking forward to moving things along. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Arroyo.
I just want to thank the maker for this and everybody who's tried to make this a possibility. I think if this allows for even one person to find some economic help and the ability to make their lives better at home with the talents that they have, that this is a fantastic program. And so I look forward to seeing what it takes to get this done. And I want to apologize in advance that I'm going to have to go to the BPS budget hearing later. So I'm going to make sure that I'm here, but my staff will also be listening throughout the rest of it. So thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Flynn.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilor Edwards. Thank you, Councilor Mejia. Thank you to the administration staff that's also here this afternoon. Appreciate the response as well from the advocates. My concern that I'd like to hopefully get some answers for today, maybe from ISD at the appropriate time, is, you know, I want to make sure we have enough inspectors that are able to inspect these residential kitchens. So I think it's important for us during budget season, during the budget process, to come down during the appropriate time and make a recommendation that we need, 15 more inspectors. We need 10 more inspectors. We need, 20 more inspectors, because residential kitchens are going to be opened. But we need to make sure we give ISD the tools to do their job to inspect these residential kitchens. I don't want to add more workload to the current inspectors that already do this. That wouldn't be very fair to them. So I want to make sure if this does take place, that we have enough funding in the city budget to hire additional inspectors. That's a critical part of this, because we need to make sure that we have inspectors and we're not overloading the current inspectors that currently do this job. They do it well. They take their job very professionally. The dedicated city employees, I have great respect for them. But I don't want to see them overloaded with a lot of new cases that they have to supervise and manage as well. So I hope we can have a discussion about that as well. Councilor Edwards, thank you very much. To the administration team, thank you very much as well.
Okay, I don't know if we've been joined by any other colleagues in this time. I'm happy to, if we want to pull up the language, or if the administration might have some summary thoughts to kind of walk through since our last conversation. I can also bring up topic by topic and figure out, how the language does address some of the concerns that we had in this working session. I'm just looking at you, the commissioner. Of course, you don't know that because we're on Zoom. So how would you like this to go? And to the advocates, while you were great in giving some background and some knowledge, I think I'm going to ask that's the major role that you play today as we talk about language, as we talk about implication. Raise your hands so I know to call on you if you can add to that conversation. Okay. So, Commissioner.
Yeah, thanks. So I think going topic by topic would make sense as we are still reviewing the edits.
Okay. And the newly edited language, Counselor Mejia, you said you sent to everyone. So we all have it in our inboxes, counselors as well, right?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. So I guess I could turn to you. Would you prefer to go topic by topic, or do you want to go to the language? As the administration said, they just got it. It might make sense that we just go topic by topic, a little higher than usual. Is that okay with you, Counselor Mejia?
Absolutely.
Okie dokie. All right, I'm just pulling up my list of topics, and then we will go right to it. Okay. So I think one of so some of the outstanding issues that we had was the landlord-tenant relationship and how permit process would work with both parties. I recall there seemed to be you needed evidence of the landlord's permission to go forward towards the ZBA in order to get a special permit. If this comes under the accessory dwelling unit, if you want to, if that's where we still are standing, was that the goal? I'm looking at Chris, who also wouldn't know what who I'm looking at indicating. Chris or the commissioner.
Chris, you can go ahead.
Sure. So I think during the hearing, when we talked about the landlord-tenant relationship, I think it was focused on two pieces of this. One is a regulatory requirement for ZBA cases. So a tenant cannot submit a ZBA appeal without being fully authorized by the property owner, since it is a formal change to the property. So there would need to be a formal document authorizing the tenant to apply on behalf of the property owner for ZBA related matters. I think the other side is more of a permitting side question for ISD Health Division when we're issuing or reviewing applications for a food service permit or a cottage food permit. And having a permission document helps us so that we know that we're not permitting something that the property owner has a problem with. So one is sort of that regulatory requirement for ZBA appeals. The other is more of a permitting requirement for just the permit in general.
Mm-hmm. So, Councilor Mejia, is from my understanding, then this process of just basically getting the landlord's permission. Actually, I'm sorry. Before I go to you, Councilor Mejia. So, Chris, is it a form that they're going to fill out? Is it a letter of attestation? What exactly would the tenant have a form to go to the landlord? They sign it, and then the tenant submits it, or they provide all the forms to the landlord for the landlord to submit?
The tenant can submit with a properly filled out form or attestation from the property owner indicating that they're okay with it. And that would be for both the ZBA process or the ISD health permit process. So we could provide a form, a template for that as far as the health division goes. That allows the tenant to submit that as part of their application.
Great. And then the ZBA, they're seeking what exactly are they? That's permanently going to be attached with the building. What exactly is being sought?
The use
just want to chime in on that because we don't think it necessarily has to be a variance that will be permanently attached. It could be something that is for a petitioner only. And we only feel strongly about the need for a variance if there's going to be direct sales to customers from the residence itself, either in person or via delivery. If someone's selling at markets or craft fairs or via mail, then we're flexible on how we would approach that.
Okay, I see you, Manisha. I will go right to you as soon as I finish a couple of clarifying questions. Okay, so there would be 3 different kinds of permission sought from the landlord. One would be the health division that's submitted to them. 2 would be either the ZBA A, if you will, which is just petitioner only for cottage goods, and or ZBA B, option B, which is we plan on selling directly from apartment number 2. And so under that one, you would expect that landlord tenant combo to seek a variance.
Or a conditional use permit.
Which one? For the direct to sale?
Yeah,
Direct to consumer
sale,
at the
yeah.
location.
Mhm.
At the home would be conditional use, so that the board could take into account the traffic, deliveries, that type of thing, hours of operation, and do to that petitioner only approval, rather than a full variance, which is conditionless and permanent to the property.
Okay, then. So just to repeat, for the ZBA, there would be 2 ways. If you're doing direct to consumer, it could be the conditional use. Right?
Correct.
Conditional use that considers traffic, hours. Would that be considering whether the person sits and eats in the kitchen? Is that considered direct to consumer? Like someone comes in and I make my cookies and I have tea at my house and they pay for that? Is that the same?
No, there's no on-site consumption.
No on-site consumption. Thank you. And that would be put obviously in the conditional use.
Right. Well, that's I think a prohibition in the sanitary code.
Excellent. And then the other version is if they just make a whole bunch and they happen to sell them online and maybe take them to whatever, or go to the farmer's market and just group sell them, that would just be just not a variance at all, but really just a petitioner use only.
Right.
So no, actually on that one, I mean, that could be something that is as of right. So it doesn't need a hearing, wouldn't need a hearing.
Okay, so basically the only time there would need to be a hearing and consideration of the conditions around the building is if they're selling it directly from the apartment or from the unit or the building.
Yeah,
Okay.
Directly to the consumer from the apartment. I mean,
Yeah.
directly there, not like you can sell directly, but via mail or direct at a farmer's market. But if they're selling directly from the home,
This
condition.
is really helpful. I'm going to go to Manisha and then I will go to my colleagues on this particular issue of landlord tenants to make sure we're thoroughly vetting this. Manisha?
So it's just a clarification that I'm seeking. What if there's a delivery service that they have for hired in between? That's not considered direct, right? The delivery service can pick up from their residents and deliver to the consumer?
Yeah, so in our opinion, and this is really keeping the community and neighbors in mind, is that if there is delivery service or direct foot traffic, we think it should be a conditional use.
Okay, thank you.
So Counselor Mejia on the issue of landlord tenant. I didn't know if you had any thoughts, concerns, pushback, agreement.
Well, I think a lot of these were already addressed in the existing language. So I feel I feel good with this. I just think that, I know that we're not talking about the text amendment that we filed, but I think some of that will ease that piece of it. And as for sale direct to consumer, the existing language says that that can't happen. So that's pretty clear already. And if, I also think that in terms of, well, actually, I think a lot of the conversations that we're having will be addressed with that amendment that we're not talking about today.
No, that's fair. I think you are correct. So the other question I think that came under landlord tenant was, and I just want to make sure I understood where we landed on this, was liability for and I think we discussed different forms of, I actually think it was Irene who brought up the different forms of insurance to protect the landlord. Is that Irene or Andre, I think, who brought it up last time? I just want to make sure we're clear that that's a oh, no, Manisha, maybe all three of you brought it up. I think that there's a way to have insurance to protect the landlord. Let's say someone gets that, digestive problems from whatever's been sold from their building, or we just make sure that plane was landed, that product exists to protect the landlord.
That's correct, City Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. All right, but that I recall being the other thing. Let's see. So another issue, the ZBA one was kind of taken care of. I do think that there was what about, do these businesses need to be registered and have DBAs with the city of Boston? Are they going to be considered businesses? What is the typical way in which they're going to be promoting themselves, LLC, so on and so forth? I'm curious that does impact liability as well, but it also, go ahead. So anybody want to address that?
Yeah, I would just quickly say that any business that is registering for one of these permits would need a DBA from the city clerk's office as a business certificate. Obviously, any business wanting to set up their business and need guidance around whether or not it should be an LLC or a sole proprietorship, my team is more than happy to walk folks through that process. But a business certificate is required.
Okay. Right. And then Councilor Mejia, I think you mentioned it, but I do know that the issues of the fire department concerns and stuff were addressed. Could you just break that down? You said something about like the certain language was to apply to them to make sure that they followed certain code language.
I'm sorry, I was on mute. All the apartments are already required to have fire systems in place, right? So it's not directly the issue with this. I think the main concern had to do with traffic. And the thing that I believe that it was really more about that and avoiding on-site sales, that they cannot do on-site sales so that there won't be a large congestion outside their door. I think it's more of a traffic issue that they had raised.
Okay.
And I think, again, going back to some of the ways that we are leaning in a little bit more on this discussion, we're able to be a little bit more clear.
Okay.
Counselor, I might just add that it may be worthwhile to bring in fire to that conversation, considering not every at-home kitchen might be in an apartment. There may be folks using their single stories or triple deckers that don't have the same fire code requirements to weigh in their opinion. And I'll defer to Chris and the commissioner here on that.
That's a really good point, Natalia. Thank you for bringing it. I'm curious if there's a way for us to modify, update the language in a way that kind of makes it specific to the different types of buildings and the different types of fire codes that we need to be mindful of. Chris, any thoughts on that?
I would say the fire code requirement is part of the state building code, right? So there are certain sizes of properties, 1 and 2 families under a certain amount of square feet are not required to have sprinklers. And property pre-code structures, I think, don't need to be sprinkled. But I think that would be addressed in the sanitary code requirement for the residential kitchen permit to say that the fires, I don't know. I would assume, I don't know the language of the sanitary code as it relates to the cottage food businesses, but I would assume that it has some sort of standard for fire suppression or even if it's just fire extinguishers on hand or.
Yeah, Chris, I mean, aside from the cottage food license, there are already existing sanitary code requirements for fire safety in every dwelling. But we would also be working with the fire department to see if there are any additional things that we can do just to make sure that these businesses are as safe as possible. One thing that we're thinking of is, having fire extinguishers. Those having that is above the minimum requirement, but it's also something that's not very costly and maybe something that makes sense. But again, love to just have a further conversation with the fire department just to see if they have any other ideas and suggestions on making this as safe as possible without making it a burden.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia?
Yeah, so no, I'm just curious, this is just me thinking out loud. If these kitchens are safe enough to cook for non-retail purposes, I'm just curious about what could make them unsafe to cook for retail purposes. I mean, I'm not envisioning super duper kind of I'm not envisioning a restaurant type of kitchen stove. I'm just trying to think of what you're envisioning. Like I'm cooking in my kitchen 24 hours a day, several weeks, but I'm not doing it for retail purposes, but I cook. And so does that mean that I need to get a permit? I'm just trying to figure out kind of where that is coming from so that we can just get some clarity on where we go for this. I know, especially for Thanksgiving, we tend to all go all out for Thanksgiving, and that's a huge undertaking. So if that's the concern, I'm curious of what that looks like in general outside of this particular conversation.
Before I go to you, Manisha, I would like to tag on to Councilor Mejia's question. Essentially, not only what is the difference in the difference between the two, I would venture it's a matter of volume, that you are using it extensively much more, but I don't know. So if you could speak to that. But also just to make sure that, we have the existing example of the ADU, kind of plans, right? And it was really exciting to see how we were able to do something else with our property within the envelope of the property. When we got that, we then had to do sprinkler systems, and as a result, it made it a very costly for a lot of folks to be able to take advantage of the new zoning benefit. I thought it was an incredibly creative way to think about that. And so as we're having this conversation, we may increase in volume, as Councilor Mejia is trying to, we may, because that's what Councilor Mejia and I are kind of struggling with, but also if we're increasing standards that result in people not being able to afford to meet them, that would be a shame. And if they can, you can address that, and then we'll go to Manisha, and a couple other people raise their hands.
Yeah, I would say I think it's a little different conversation than with the ADUs, because there are already existing laws relative to when you have 3 units instead of 2. It puts you in a different category for fire safety, and so I think the fire department's main concern, as it always is like fire safety, particularly with units that are that are below grade, that are maybe not as easy to escape from. Relative to this, I think you can make an argument that even in a current kitchen, it's a good idea to get a fire extinguisher. It's not required, but it's, you know, maybe 20, 30 bucks, and it would make you a lot safer. And so where I'm not raising this to say that we want to create a burdensome barrier that's insurmountable. We're just looking at like what are like easy things to do that we could just help someone who's now going to sort of transition your kitchen from being purely making meals for your own family to now you're making things for sale to the public. So there will be an increase in use. Are there some common sense things that we could think about just to make it safer? But absolutely, I get it. We're not looking to create such a huge barrier that folks say the fire safety thing makes me not want to do this.
Manisha and Andre.
Sure, I think Andre had his hand up before me.
Oh, my apologies, Andre.
Problem. Thank you. And thank you all. I just wanted to mention the conversation that was surfaced last month on this issue from Councillor Bach in particular. And then again, what this issue as an advocate, what it's raising for me and what Commissioner Irish just mentioned is the last thing we want to do is make it overly complicated to the point that producers don't even want to apply for this because there's so many hoops to jump through. Which is why I know we're not talking about any specific ordinance right now, but I think it's important to recognize these operations as accessory to the unit and not the sole function of the unit when folks are applying through ISD or applying through zoning, which is why I think, and I brought this up in the October hearing on this initiative, why I think it's so important that this type of operation, retail residential kitchens, is defined within the zoning code, so that that's a use as of right. And the permitting, on the permitting end, I think there's still nuance to how we could go, how the ISD and could go about getting landlord approval and making sure that the foods that are permitted is permissible. But yeah, on one end, we don't want to create an overly complicated burden, and on the other end, we have to keep in mind that referencing what Councilor Mejia just mentioned in terms of use of kitchen, irrespective of if I'm selling it, just making sure that we're keeping in mind that these are accessory to the unit and not, a business solely for the purpose of, I don't live in a business, I live in my home, and accessory to that is a retail residential kitchen. So just that comment.
It's an excellent way of characterizing it. I live in my home. This is my home. An accessory, a thing that I also use it for is this. I think that's a great way to envision this as we go forward. Manisha?
I think Andre stated it well, so that's basically what I was trying to say. I have reached out for precedents here in the town of Wellesley to the fire department here, but we have different type of codes and not as many multi-dwelling units here, so we're in a different field. But I think Andre stated it very well, so thank you.
Councilor Mejia?
Yeah, I would have to say thank God for the advocates, because they know what's up. They know how to speak in ways that we can all understand. So thank you so much for bringing that out. I really do appreciate that's exactly the sentiment that we were trying to get, but you did a great job at hitting that home run. So thank you. I always go back to the fact that this is something that already on the state level is already authorized and approved. And, I keep going back to how other cities and towns have managed to do this. So I'm really hoping that we can get there as a city. And then just to respond to ISD's comments, you guys will have to do an inspection of the properties, right? So if there are any reasons why upon an inspection,
Why can't I raise my hand?
The kitchen is not able to be a retail kitchen, so then be it. Like, that's part of the process, right? So like, let's say for instance, when you do the inspection, you could just say, well, based on X, Y, and Z, you're not able to function as a retail kitchen. Could it be as simple as that?
Yes.
Thank you for being brief.
I mean, I can elaborate, but it is as simple as
Yeah.
that.
All right. Thank you.
So,
Go ahead.
City Councilor Edwards, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
go
I
ahead.
can't find my raising hand button.
Oh, okay, no problem.
I'd like to add to my fellow advocates' commentary, but in respect to Commissioner Irish's comments on the volume and everybody's concern around the volume. So the FDA requires that anything that is the maximum amount for a food cottage produced is $25,000 in revenue. So if a residential kitchen operator or entrepreneur in this case is making over $25,000 in revenue, then they are poised to actually move into a shared use kitchen, which is why it's beneficial to their operations and their entrepreneurship efforts. So in this case, they would have figured out their customers, they would have figured out the pricing, they would have figured out all of the risk that is associated with being a food entrepreneur, and actually ready to invest in moving into one of the many shared use kitchens here in the city or throughout the Commonwealth.
Thank you. Extremely helpful. So it's based off of revenue, determining whether you are, either living in your home and doing kind of side thing versus poised to be more commercial.
Right.
Extremely helpful. Thank you so much. I have a question about my question really kind of comes around like the wraparound services the city might do. This is TA, technical assistance. And also, is this something that we would think would kind of also should be bringing the Office of Emerging Industries? I mean, while it is solely dealing with cannabis at this time, this would be one of those emerging industries in Boston, we hope, that grows. And a lot of what comes from that office is kind of an internal advocacy wing within the city of Boston for an emerging industry, saying, you have too much red tape over here, you guys aren't considering this. TA, technical assistance, literally we give out grants for emerging businesses in cannabis. If suddenly, like, for example, traffic studies became a big deal for the dispensaries, the city helps to pay for them for some equity applicants. So I'm wondering if the city would be open to doing the same thing here. I would like to think that we're going to make it so simple that anybody, including Miss Microwave Everything, also known as Lydia Edwards, could become a residential kitchen. Not saying I'd sell much, but I'd like to think that we could do that, or that people who are inspired to do that could go now, not just to the ZBA, not just to, the forms and stuff, but really be wrapped wholly around by the city. And I'm wondering, maybe that's a point for us to bring in OEI office. Yes. So just thoughts about that. I know we talked about bringing in the fire, but I really like the way Andre said it. I don't want to be seen as something to limit. I want to see us wrapping around to enhance.
So I can speak to just the existing services that are available. As you mentioned, Counselor, there are existing resources for all small businesses. We offer technical assistance that comes in the way of marketing, web design, legal, accounting, like you name it, we offer those services. I think obviously I will leave it up to this group to bring in other folks to speak on other resources that are available. But what I might recommend is that until we know how many businesses are going to need support and what this actually ends up looking like at the city of Boston, I would say that for now my office is available to support any and all businesses that come to us for help on this. We're constantly building our TA program to include new and creative business support opportunities. We've actually also invited Manisha here on this call based off of this conversation to consider becoming an a TA contractor, with the small business team to help businesses actually do this. So I think we're open to those conversations. I can't speak about the Office of Emerging Industries because I don't know what resources that they have available, but I can say that the Small Business Office currently does have resources available for small businesses and would be more than happy to support businesses in that way. And that, I mean, those wraparound services include support through permitting, support through kind of all elements of what businesses need to go through. We work very closely with ISD and all of our programming. And so we'll continue to do that so that there isn't, that many hurdles for businesses to have to go through in order to get established.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia, then Manisha.
Mute. I guess, what I'm having a hard time with is that a lot of the concerns we've heard so far are either addressed by the possibility of the text amendment, which we're not going to discuss, as Councilor Edwards already has advised, or by ISD and other city departments that can handle within their own policies and procedures. I haven't heard anything. I'm just curious what other things in regards to the actual ordinance that's in the language in itself that we should also be tackling while we're here. The need for the landlord support. It states that food cannot be sold on site. It says that any inspections or protocols that need to be followed are enforced by existing protocols. So I'm just curious, as we continue to move through this, I love the fact that we're already thinking about other departments that could potentially support this. So I really do appreciate Councilor Edwards thinking about this as an emerging market and an emerging support group. Is that something that you are recommending that we include in the ordinance as part of something that happens, or it was just something so that I'm understanding the process?
Before you go, Manisha, let me just quickly respond to that. The only reason why I thought of OEI, and it was not to say at all that Natalia isn't already doing a wonderful job for small business, is it's just I remembered that it allowed for a nimble conversation that dealt with specifically cannabis, because the regulations were changing and there was always like a move around and trying to figure those things out. And there, because of the zoning, we were, some people could apply within a half mile and couldn't, but we didn't know where everyone was. And so, it may be that because this is done already and it's not a statewide emerging industry, right? With new regs, with a hostile federal government, we may not need OEI. I just thought if an office exists to support emerging industries, that they should be part of the conversation. Not in opposition at all, Councilor Mejia, just in total excited support.
Yeah, no, I know. I guess, we've been working on this for a long time, and I know that everyone, the advocates and everyone is really anxious for the moving forward. And I definitely want to steer us back on track to amending the actual language so that it can pass. The goal is for us to get something passed. So policies and protocols are not as specific here because the city has already existing policies and protocols that they need, that we need to know on how to implement. So that's kind of like where I'm hoping that we can get your greatest thinking around the amendment in the language so that we can get it to the council floor and passed ideally.
Of course. Manisha?
I have a hard stop at about 5:05. I apologize. But I just wanted to add on to Natalia's point and Councilor Edwards, yours. I think once you see some analytics behind the economic viability that this will eventually bring, you will realize that what you all are doing is of great benefit to multiple constituents. And a correct technology and used in the correct fashion can offer you those analytics. So I can, just building on to Councilor Mejia's comments, I hope that we can make this work. So thank you all.
Thank you. And just to be clear, we also, the reason why we're going based on topic and not in the language is we kind of agreed to talk of existing topics. So I'm just going to continue to talk about the existing topics. I have only a couple more left. And these are, again, some things that were discussed that we wanted to finish that sentence today. So we discussed landlord, we discussed the zoning and the permitting process. This was, I think, just to remind folks, Irene brought up the fact that she took a food safety training course at UMass, and that would be also part of an available resource for many folks. And then, I'm sorry, oh, Chris, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Chris, go ahead.
Oh, it's just Councilor Mejia mentioned actual language changes, so I know we can get to that sort of at the end of your list of topics, but we had 2 suggestions for language, so but we can get to that after we go through the topics.
Okay, I'll make it quick in terms of then the topics. Let's see. We discussed also the training required surf safe management. It's required for food permits. Did we land on that, whether it would be required in this time for these? I don't remember. That's what I'm asking. Andre, you're nodding your head.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Councilor Edwards,
Mhm.
I would like for the committee to please consider that the food entrepreneur not only take the Serve Safe class, which I've taken, and the state allergens, but also that they take the UMass class and a number of other classes, which also build up on the food safety and reinforcement of the importance of food safety to the public. And I mean, that would not only be great for the entrepreneur, their brand, but also just city government, just us as a committee. So there are a number of classes that are essential. A great example, I'm currently applying to get into some shared use kitchens, and I was told by Commonwealth Kitchen that I need to take another class. So it's more complex, and I'm happy to work with Natalia to make this list of classes so that the entrepreneur is really ready and understands the importance of food safety and current GMP practices around sanitation and their protocols on food allergens.
So you're asking that be certain classes and training be required as part of the permit, and I heard some folks that they already are.
Yes, but there
Yes.
are also additional classes that I think would benefit the entrepreneur, because it's
But
like
are we
learning
to
Chinese
consider?
or Russian, so it's
Yeah.
kind of hard.
A little, but I guess I'm trying to make sure I'm clear with you, Irene. You want to add additional things as a requirement for this permit, or you just want
Yes.
to? Okay, and so along with
Yes.
the things that are required, the
Mhm.
Serve Safe, which is required,
Yes.
you want to add what?
The product development class at UMass,
You know,
and there's a HACCP class that they should take, which would help them understand where their kill steps are. Pretty much all of these classes help them understand the importance of food safety and also plan out their process. This is mainly because I'm in the process of applying to a commercial kitchen, and I thought I had all of my bells and whistles, but apparently I don't. So I was told I have to take more classes. So, but in this particular working session, I can work with Natalia and we can create a list and we can share it with the committee. But definitely the product safety is a must. The product safety at UMass Amherst is phenomenal.
Counselor, can I respond to that? I recognize that there's some hands up. So I just want to note that we don't typically, unless there's like an explicit RFP or an explicit partnership, an MOU, we can't, we typically cannot require businesses or anyone to attend a specific class. I think what ISD and Dan in particular have mentioned in the past is around, proving that someone has been, educated on the requirements for handling food. As far as business development, I mean, our office puts together workshops and trainings to help businesses with their, business development and those types of things. But I think we would either need to put out a public procurement after receiving some, funding to be able then to establish a partnership, because I think the limitations there are around, picking one program over the other. And I just would hesitate to make additional requirements of businesses. You may have very, experienced business owners trying to do this at home, and for them to have to pay to do another class, to then go through the class, to then apply for a permit, I think would be an undue burden on business owners. My recommendation would be to make that a suggestion, and I'm happy to work with you, Irene, on identifying some workshops and trainings that we could put together to potentially offer to folks as a way of further supporting businesses. But I would strongly recommend against making it a requirement of a permit to go through additional education classes to be able to participate in this business.
Thank you. In
So-
order of hands, and yes, I'll give you an opportunity, Irene, to respond, but we had Councilor Flynn, Councilor Mejia, then Dan, and I'm so sorry, Dion, you took your hand down. So I'm good. I apologize. So, go ahead, Irene, very briefly in response, and then we're going to go to the other folks who have some comments.
Sure. So the product development class at UMass actually walks the food entrepreneur through labeling, allergens, hazard analysis, how to create a flow chart, meaning when you get your food, what do you do? When do you put in the refrigerator? When do you clean your countertops? It talks about GMP practices. It's a very fundamental class, and most importantly, it is affordable. The reason why I'm recommending it is because I personally found it to be very, very, very helpful through my own entrepreneurship journey once I realized I was breaking the law. So it is, yes, Councilor Edwards, it is an important class. And so any food entrepreneur, I understand you saying that we shouldn't require it. I'm saying that if we want to set up our entrepreneurs to be successful, they need to take this class. It's only $50, 2 days long, 8 hours, 16 hours total. It is worth $50.
Thank you. And so we can take that under advisement, but it looks like either way, the city can, through permitting or through just direct with advertising and pushing for TA, direct people towards this class as well. So we can get this into people's
seats being moved, particularly in certain neighborhoods and geographic.
And also provide technical assistance if people needed the $50, for example. I'm sure the city could come up with some sort of help for that as well. So in order, we have Councilor Flynn, then Councilor Mejia, then Dion.
Thank you. Thank you, Council Edwards. I jumped off the call a little while ago for another meeting. I don't know if it's appropriate for me to ask my question now. It's related to the subject, but it might be unrelated to this specific topic here, but is it okay if I?
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor Edwards. So I just wanted to ask Commissioner Irish or Chief English, how many more inspectors do you need if this is enacted? How many more food inspectors do you need once this is approved to do these inspections, depending obviously on how many people would open up residential kitchens, but what are your thoughts?
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. We're unable to answer that question at this time because of exactly why you stated. We don't have any idea of what the volume is going to look like. I can tell you we currently have 18 inspectors. We just received a packet of folks that we're going to be interviewing. So we're going to be bringing on 2 more additional inspectors. So we're looking good currently, but it all is going to depend on what the demand looks like. But we will definitely be reaching out if we feel like we're seeing a lot of applications and we're seeing more than we can handle in a safe manner to ensure that we're doing timely annual or even more frequent inspections.
Yeah, well, thank you, Commissioner. I know you'll reach out, and my concern is, I always ask department heads if they have issues to come down during budget season, and let us know that you don't have enough funding. And I always ask them, do you have enough funding? And the answer is always yes, we have enough. But I know you need more inspectors. I know Dan needs more inspectors. We don't have enough inspectors in the city to visit all these restaurants. So that's why I'm stressing that we need a financial plan to make sure that when this is enacted, we have the funding to hire immediately inspectors. That's important. And I think this is a good program, but I want to make sure we commit the money for it too. That's also important. And just wanted to get Dan's opinion, because I see the inspectors all the time in the city. They do a tremendous job and they're very professional. I think they're overworked. I don't think they get paid enough. I think they have a huge caseload. They're very professional. But Dan, do we need more inspectors?
So Councilor, I'm happy to let Dan chime in, but I just want to say that we did ask the mayor for more inspectors, and we did get more inspectors in this budget, and I want to thank the council for approving that. And so we're going to be adding additional inspectors to the field very shortly. Dan, do you have anything to add?
No, that's very well said, Commissioner. Thank you.
Okay. I just want to let you guys. Sorry about that. I just want to let you guys know during the budget season, I'm going to ask during the budget season if you guys have enough inspectors to do the job. And I just want everyone to be honest that I don't think we do have enough inspectors, and we need to make sure that there's money in the budget so we can hire more inspectors so that they can adequately do the job effectively, representing the residents of the city. So again, the respect I have for the workers at ISD, but I don't like to overload people with work. I think it's unfair, and we need to hire more inspectors. Thank you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia?
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm all for workers' rights. I usually have to have 2 jobs just so I can make my own ends meet. So this is the first time that I only need 1 job. So totally respect Flynn's advocacy on behalf of our overworked population. I was up until recently one of those people. I do have a question though, in regards to, because this is a new initiative, I think the question that Councilor Flynn is bringing up, I think it would be important for us to reevaluate it once the program is initiated, just to kind of really realistically see the workload and to see whether or not this is something that is going to be burdensome. Like, I think that what we should include or even consider saying is that we'll see what this looks like. And then in the next year's budget, we can determine based on how many residential kitchens have popped up, then we can add a dollar amount to that workload. And I think it would be important for Commissioner Irish to kind of keep a track of that, so that when you do your budget for the next year, then we'll be able to do a better assessment and making sure that that advocacy that Councilor Flynn is doing on the behalf of ISD, that we can rise to that occasion, right? So I think that that would be one way to address it, because we need that data to be able to fairly assess that. And I think the overworking situation, that is even before this ordinance came into play. So I think let's just keep it 100. If we need to pay these ISD workers even more, let's do that right now. Let's get more right now, even before this ordinance came up into this place, because this has nothing to do with that. I think that is a whole other conversation. And if I'm clear around this, Commissioner Irish, this will be a once in a year inspection, right? Like, like, let's say for instance, 20 applicants applied for this, this inspection will only happen at the time that they apply, right? It's not like y'all gonna be rolling out like every 2 months, you're gonna go back to do inspections, right? So it's just a once a year inspection, right? So
Yeah.
I just want to be clear, right? It's just once a year.
At the time of application, there will definitely be an inspection, and going forward, there'd be an annual inspection at minimum, but there could be multiple inspections. And Dan, feel free to add if there's more than that, but the baseline is one annual inspection.
Okay, good.
Yes, correct, Commissioner. Yes, our goal would be to inspect these residential kitchens once annually. However, if there are complaints that are received at ISD Health, we would also conduct inspections to address these complaints as well. So minimum 1 time per year, and then complaint generated thereafter, if applicable.
And great, thank you for that clarity. And I just kind of want to go back really quick in regards to the UMass situation. I think that it's just important for us to, I agree with Natalia, and I also agree with Irene. I think it's a good idea for us to be really thorough, but I don't know if writing it into the ordinance or identifying a particular program to name would be the right course of action at this stage of the game. I think that what the small business economic development can do is potentially provide just information on their website of the different types of programs that exist, and that people can choose whatever makes the most sense for them, their budget, their time, and have that little bit more flexibility around what that would look like.
Excellent. I'm going to go ahead and go to Dan, and then I think we had some text amendments that I'd like Chris to discuss. So Dan.
Thank you, Councilor. So yes, I raised my hand. I just wanted to try to follow up with Irene. Irene, I am very familiar with the UMass program that you've referenced today. It is a very good tool for especially new small businesses to begin on the path of hopefully extreme success. As far as licensing goes, there is an established process where we will be looking for at minimum certified food manager requirement and allergen awareness training. Not sure it's needed to get a residential kitchen permit. However, I am in full support of the UMass program that you mentioned as providing businesses some alternative tools and assistance to help them in the industry. As residential kitchens, they'll be allowed and permitted to prepare and sell cottage foods. By definition, non-TCS or time temperature control for safety foods. Therefore, a certified food manager and allergen awareness training, I think, would be sufficient to start at this time. So, thank you.
Okay, excellent. So we're just going to go now to the suggested language changes from INC.
Sure. Not necessarily changes, just additions, one related to signage and one related to advertising. So we would like to suggest including a provision that prohibits exterior signage for the building, for the business, just in keeping with the neighborhood character of these being residential homes. There are already prohibitions on exterior signage for businesses, like a snow plowing business, for example. So we just wanted to include that in the ordinance. The other would be related to advertising and requiring that the ISD permit number be included on any advertising, online advertising, similar to how we do short-term rentals, for example. So that one, the customer knows that the business is certified and permitted from ISD, and two, just for compliance purposes for us.
Council Mejia, thought?
I'm happy to provide suggested language to Counselor if you'd like.
So there's two suggestions. One is to prohibit outdoor or on the building facade advertising of the residential kitchen, and the other one is to make sure that we are putting permit numbers on any form of advertising, whether it's at the farmer's market or on your website, Facebook page, business cards.
Exactly.
Okay. Go ahead, Councilor Mejia.
If there are already exterior signage provisions elsewhere, I'm not sure why we would need to put it in here. I'm on board with the advertising provision, but I'm curious about how that will impact whether or not it will, if it needs to be included, written via an ordinance. I'm just wondering.
Just to be clear, you're fine with the advertising provisions, so that's off, not an issue. With the putting the permit number on wherever they choose to advertise. But the question is whether we need to legislate further the conditions for outdoor advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you for my translation, because you're always good at translating what I'm trying to say. Yes, Councilor Edwards, exactly.
Just to make sure I'm clear, that's all. Councilor Chris or Dion or Commissioner, whichever one.
So I don't know the explicit restriction on signage. I don't know if it's in the zoning code or if it's in city ordinance already. So I thought the cleanest way to do it would be to include it specifically in this ordinance, just so that we know it's there and where the reference is.
Can you send over the language? We would be on board with the advertising provision again, but I'm just curious as to whether or not this is one of those things that are like gonna delay the process of us moving this over.
Happy to. I think 2 quick sentences would probably suffice, but happy to share that.
Councilor Flynn raised his hand.
Thank you, Council Edwards. Yeah, I agree with Chris English. I think there should be something in writing about outdoor advertising. Many of you know this is a bigger issue, but I've dealt with outdoor advertising in my district, and if you don't have it written down, it makes it much more difficult for you when someone tries to put out outdoor advertisement up and then going back to change the law on it. So I agree with Chris. Just wanted to add one more issue relating to that. Chris, when a client would come into the restaurant, when a client would come into the residential kitchen, would the customer see the certificate of inspection hung up on the wall like you traditionally do at a restaurant or a bar?
I would defer to Dan, but I think that is a requirement of the sanitary code that it be displayed prominently.
Yes, that is correct, Chris. Any business that is in possession of a health permit needs to have it posted in a conspicuous place on the premises.
And Dan, for these residential kitchens, what would the recommended location be in the house? Like in the hallway leading into the kitchen, that type of thing?
Yeah, I would say most commonly in the hallway, in the entrance to the kitchen. If you have it in the middle of the kitchen, it has a chance to become, wet and soiled and things of that nature. So yes, in the hallway, in the entrance to the kitchen, Councilor.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Councilor Edwards.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
I do have I'm just curious.
Go ahead.
In terms of the signage, I'm just curious. Oh yes, Kenzie Bach is in the house. Okay. I'm just curious, like, I don't know who can, I would love to meet the person who cannot afford to have a commercial kitchen space, but then can afford a big signage. So I'm curious, when you talk about how it will alter the character of the neighborhood, what kind of signage are you thinking about? You're like looking at billboard ads, like residential kitchen, come get your cottage food this way. Like, what are you talking about when you say that? Help me understand what that visual looks like for you all.
I think we're just trying to, it's not so much prohibiting as making sure that this is consistent with laws that are already there. We agree with you. I agree with you, Councilor Mejia. If they're already there, then maybe it's just referencing to the laws that are already there versus creating a whole new set in this zoning.
Yeah.
Just that might just make more sense. And that way, because and I know there are some incredibly creative, artistic folks out there who will figure out a way. They'll figure out a way to advertise their wares, and good for them. They're in the hustle. They're trying to do what they have to do. But if we just make it clear, you have to comply with certain laws that are already on the books, then we're not adding anything or subtracting anything either.
Thank you for that, Edwards. I think it's really important for us to continue to remind ourselves of what we're trying to do and the why we're trying to do it. And so I think if there are already existing laws in the books, let's just follow those and not try to bake that into this little situation here.
Yeah, Councilor, I don't know if I can be helpful here, but it's Article 11 of the zoning code really regulates the kind of signage you can do in residential areas, and it probably does prohibit, this kind of signage. I think Chris English's point was more one of, don't make people dig through the zoning code to find out, find Article 11 and figure out how that applies to them. Just have it in there, and so it's easier for them to find, so they know right up front. Because you don't want to have people spend money. And believe you me, people spend money on signs and then they find they can't put them up, and it's very frustrating. So I think that's more of a matter of not telling people what to do, but more, giving them a heads up so they don't go down the wrong path accidentally.
Yeah.
What was the chapter again? What was the chapter again?
Article 11.
Article 11.
Yeah, it's the first part of it talks about signage in residential districts and sort of limits it to things like, the house signs and political signs, and, you got a room for rent and things like that, and sort of limits the size. But if you're running a business out of your home, like Chris's point of, I repair lawnmowers, or I do snow blowing in the winter, or I'll haul junk or whatever. I think generally they don't allow that kind of thing in residential areas. It's mainly temporary signage or house signage. I think there may be exception for like if you're a doctor or something, but other than that, there's no commercial signage in residential areas.
I think that's probably something that we can. I like the idea, Brian, in terms of like directing people to the specific, so that they know. So then that way they're held accountable to, or at least we're holding ourselves accountable to making sure that we're pointing people in the right direction. And I think that this is something when you go and fill out the permit or whatever, that this is something that we can reinforce as a city. At a point of contact. Hey, don't forget, this is a residential kitchen. There's a few things that I think that that's something that we could just,
because
it's not so much it's more of a practice that we can do to help support our constituents.
Yeah, no, and you'd be surprised how often that happens. That somebody, they get excited, they've got a new business or whatever, and they go out and they spend a ton of money on a big new sign, and then find out that they can't do it and they can't get that money back. So it just is mainly to keep people from making a mistake in the first place. And that's no way to start off your new business, is to drop $500 or $1,000 on a sign and find out you can't use it.
So thank you for that.
Yep. Thank you. I want to make sure. Councilor Bach has raised her hand.
Yeah, thanks so much, Councilor Edwards and Councilor Mejia. Still really excited about this, and sorry that I missed the first hour, although my aide has taken excellent notes, so I've, I think, kind of caught up. But I just wanted one comment on this last point, was just, I think we should be trying to make it clear for the folks who are participating. So as Brian said, they don't splash out on something they can't have up. And then I also think that, like, structurally, right, it's a goal of ours, like the whole, I think, like the whole goodness of this idea is that this is a straightforward thing that people should be able to do, that they're already set up to do in their home kitchens, and it benefits all of our like local entrepreneurs. You don't want to end up in a situation where these people are unnecessarily pit against their residential neighbors, nor do you want to end up in a situation where small businesses and business districts are resenting the folks in the residential districts. So I think what's good about the signage thing is like, if we don't take care of it, I can imagine a world in which residential kitchen businesses are getting into conflicts with their neighbors over the signage. And then that's becoming a reason people are trying to stop it. And we don't want to see that. And then I think it's also just kind of fair to the commercial businesses for everything to be kind of operating under the existing rules. So I think there's a good opportunity to do this. And I agree with Councilor Mejia, it shouldn't slow this thing down. But I think there's a way to just refer to what we've got already and make it straightforward. And then I know that it's now sort of complicated because I think Councilor Mejia has the other zoning docket in coming before the body this week. So I imagine Councilor Edwards, you'll be kind of doing a hearing around that. But because of how they're connected, I just wondered if I could.
No, we're not discussing the language of it. It has not been properly noticed for this conversation. So
okay, I wasn't going to ask a language question. So I'm going to ask a question about this docket then, which is just, I think that am I right, Councilor Mejia, that you guys proposed an edit here that takes out the reference to, like approval from the ZBA, because really you're going to deal in the zoning amendment side with kind of what will even require an appeal for a conditional use. Is that a fair summary? That wasn't that clear.
They did, just to, yes, directly answer, they did remove the language about the ZBA as an approval component. And I do actually think just going ahead and making it part of the zoning code under a filed amendment does exactly that.
Yeah, great, awesome. And so, and I guess, does that all, like, I know we're going to discuss the details of that later, but does that kind of shift in how to legislate this make sense to ISD? Has ISD spoken to that?
I don't think we were allowed to.
We didn't speak to the removal of the ZBA. We did specifically talk about variance, conditional use, and also if you would need to go to the ZBA at all, if, for example, you were just doing cottage and then bringing it to farmer's market, you don't need to at all.
Great. Okay, that's the main thing. And that was something I raised last time, and I know that Councilor Mejia and I talked about, and I'm really glad to hear that. So then I think the remainder of my questions, Councilor Edwards, are probably for the yet to be noticed hearing. So grateful.
Yes, they are.
Sorry, I was on mute and off video, so I had no idea, like you could not hear or see me, but yes, all the things that you said, and thank you, Councilor Edwards, for standing in and answering on my behalf. Thank you.
No problem. So I think where this lands in this working session, we just made sure to finish some of the conversation we had before. I don't believe in any way, shape, or form we're able to do anything with hot foods at this moment. Am I correct? Because state law is only about cottage foods. Okay, so that was one of the things that came up, and how we could begin that process. That might be for another hearing then. So in as much as hot foods are taken care of, I want to make sure that we were clear though, when it came to deliveries, though they're not direct to consumer, deliveries or impacts on traffic, we were going to require, okay, does that include if you made food in your unit for sale at a food truck or for sale at a push cart? Or are you considering that kind of the farmer's market round that's not direct to consumer? Which one?
Yeah, I consider that similar to the farmer's market route.
Okay. Okay, thank you so much. I do not have any further questions. I do like the suggestions from ISD on the current language. Yes, as Councilor Bach alluded to, there's a pending zoning amendment to be presented to this committee. We will likely combine the conversations of both that and this existing amendment speaking with Councilor Mejia, she may want to supplant one for the other, which is also what is totally within her purview to decide. And then we will be able to continue this conversation. And as she has suggested, move towards equity, move as fast as possibly towards getting this robust, I think, wonderfully emerging industry on the books and moving. So unless anybody has any other questions, I see it, 2 hands. Commissioner Irish, you raised your hand.
Yes, so this is why I raised it earlier, but I wanted to give room for other folks to talk. But I wanted to chime in on your question about what type of assistance are we prepared to provide. And Natalia, did a great job answering that, and I look forward to partnering with her office to help folks. But I also just want to remind folks that ISD not only issues permits and violations, we also do provide a lot of guidance and a lot of technical assistance to folks. And we're currently doing that. We have monthly workshops for folks who are interested in creating ADUs. We have a zoning 101 workshop that I want to just promote, because that is this Thursday. Actually, is it tomorrow evening? A zoning 101 workshop. So I just would like folks to tune into that. And there are more things coming. We're working on a series of guides to help folks navigate ISD and be successful. That will also be in multiple languages. And with respect to residential kitchens, we're fully prepared for the next stage of when we get past this, is to how do we help folks to take advantage of this to be successful, and to provide them with the assistance that's needed in partnership with our Office of Economic Development and with the City Council.
Thank you. Councilor Mejia for some final remarks, questions, and then concluding remarks.
Sure, thank you. Thank you again for everything and everyone who participated in getting us this far. I agree with, and I'm okay with the recommendation from Chris English. Like, I think we should definitely, if we want to be explicit about adding that language in, I'm okay with it. I guess the question that I have, it seems like it's my understanding that we will not be moving to pass this tomorrow. I'm just curious, beyond that edit, which Chris will be sending, there would be any reason to hold this docket up any longer. So I'm just curious, am I hearing that this is going to be paused longer?
Councilor Mejia, because I think you're already, the proposed zoning amendment that you have is actually going to deal with a lot of the things and possibly make some of this language obsolete. And what we would like to be passed tomorrow, it makes more sense to just hold this in committee, have the hearing / working session on the zoning amendment that you want. It's stronger. It actually provides more protections and actually makes it part of our entire zoning conversation permanently. I'd rather go for the big gun, which is what you filed, and finish that with that versus a temporary step and then turning around and doing a zoning amendment based off of that. So what I'm trying to say is we want to pass the ultimate finishing version, which is what you filed on Monday. But I'm happy to talk with you more offline if you'd like to, about, if you feel a sense of urgency to do one thing and then enhance it later on. But you have my word, I can move stuff very fast. And since the conversation has been robust and it's very clear that what you were doing was actually enhancing the zoning, I would be excited to move that as well.
You're the expert. I defer to you. I'm cool with it.
Thank you. Folks, if there's any other further language or suggestions or concluding remarks with that, I'm going to end the working session. And thank you so much. I'm really happy that we're going to be moving this forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
You too now.
Night.
How do I exit? Leave. Bye, Dan.
Bye, everybody.